Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this latest PCS Live event aimed at discussing our national campaign, our ongoing national campaign for pay, pensions and job security, and to discuss the statutory ballot, which started this Monday, just gone, the 18th of March and runs through to the 13th of May. I'm Martin Kavanagh. I'm the acting national president of PCS, and I want to give a warm welcome to everyone joining this event tonight in what is a crucial stage for our union and our ballot as we press for the demands and the pay and pensions justice that our members deserve. Just before we start, I just want to give a warm welcome, and we're really pleased to be joined once again tonight by Richard Laws, our BSL interpreter, obviously there to provide a vital service. And Richard always does a fantastic job for us at all of these events. So a warm welcome, Richard. Pleased to see you again, comrade. And tonight, we're going to be joined by the PCS General Secretary, Fran Heathcote, and Fran will be talking through the latest stages of our campaign, where we're at with the statutory ballot, and answering some of the questions that we know many of you will have about that ballot and where we go next as part of our national campaign. Just a reminder for everybody that we are live tonight on 3 separate platforms, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on X. And you can post either questions or comments on all 3 of those platforms, and those questions will be relayed to us by our brilliant support staff in PCS, who will be sending them through to myself, and I will then relay them to Fran to answer and respond to when we come to the Q&A part of this evening's event. So without further ado, just a reminder really to please press the share button, make sure that we get as wide a coverage of this event as we possibly can. It's critical for any members who have not able to join us live today still have the opportunity to see and hear from their General Secretary. So please press that share button, and please make sure that you post your comments and your questions on the various platforms so we can make this as an engaged event as we possibly can. So without further ado, I'm going to now give a warm welcome to the PCS General Secretary, Fran Heathcote, to take you through the next part of this evening's events. Fran?
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Martin, and good evening, everybody. Really pleased to be able to join you tonight and hopefully give you a useful update in terms of everything that's happened. So you'll remember from our previous Facebook Live event that the NEC in February took the decision around a consultation which took place, a consultation with reps and members about whether or not we should move to a statutory ballot and whether or not people were broadly supportive of our demands, and I'll run through those in a moment. And as a result of the consultation, where overwhelmingly those that responded favourably, we had an 86% in favour of the demands. Nearly that figure saying that they would be prepared to take action, and 65%, just over 65%, agreeing that they would be keen to re-establish the levy. So obviously, if we are accepting that we adopt this strategy that's worked so well for us in the campaign that we were running over the previous 12 months, then just to recap, that strategy is one of targeted action, where we ask a small group of members to take action on behalf of everybody else. Because they're doing that on behalf of everybody else, it's only right that we financially recompense them, and therefore we would need, in order to do that, to establish a levy once again, and that alongside that we would also take days of all member action, but at times when that can be have maximum impact in terms of what other unions are doing, in terms of where we can really make sure that the action we take has an impact on the employer, has an impact on the government. So since the NEC met on the 6th of March, clearly by then we had submitted not just the pay claim, in terms of the pay claim that PCS makes, not just to the Cabinet Office, but to all delegated employers, but we had also served trade dispute letters on all 206 employers who are part of the campaign. And we have had a handful of responses back from those, really just urging members to reps rather, to get involved in the negotiations that will take place in the various employer groups. But quite clearly, the campaign, we're not starting at year zero, are we? We've had a successful campaign that ran during 2023. We paused the action in the autumn of 2023 in order to take stock of both the delegated talks that had taken place in all of the employer groups, or that were taking place, but also in terms of the talks that were taking place with Cabinet Office, that myself and at the time Mark Sawatka were involved in. Those talks have I think perhaps been positive in the longer term, in as much as there is an acceptance that the long-held PCS aim of pay coherence, the idea that you have less delegated pay bargaining units, the simple idea that if you do similar work to somebody else in a different department of a similar grade, you should expect to be earning roughly the same amount of money, is not rocket science, and it's one that, when talked through with the Cabinet Office, it's quite clear that the delegated pay system which the civil service operates under is now a broken system. It's a system that sees tens of thousands of our members fall below the national living wage every April. It means that those members have to have an enforced uplift just for the employer, the government, to stay within the law. It's a system that, because of continued pay restraint and low pay, sees people having to claim in work benefits. It sees many of our members year on year get to a situation where, because of the uplift in the national minimum wage, at the same time as our pay is being restrained, the grading system is also broken. So the AA and the A grade often has little or no distinction between it now, and that is now seeping into the EO grade as well, because of years of pay restraint. So when the NEC met, we had a presentation from the academic research that we had commissioned. We'd commissioned some research, two pieces of research. The first part has now been published, and you should have hopefully had sight of that. And what that research told us was that years of pay restraint, years of delegated pay bargaining, where pay was held down under various governments, has led to a situation where, depending which grade you work at, your pay has fallen behind somewhere between 18% and 62% over the time since the coalition government came to power. And that's disgraceful. That's a terrible situation for our members to be in. And the thing that the latest Minister for the Cabinet Office, John Glenn, was quite sensitive to was the idea that the civil service is now seen as a minimum wage employer. And whilst they may well want to refute that claim, the reality is, when you have lots and lots of tens of thousands of members falling below the minimum wage, that makes the civil service a minimum wage employer. And that's a disgusting situation to be in. It's not good enough, is it? But of course, the campaign isn't just about pay. It's also around our pensions and trying to get pensions justice for members who have been overpaying on their pensions month on month ever since the government decided to reevaluate the pension scheme, the result of which showed that the scheme was actually costly and was efficient and value for money. And if anything, people were overpaying money that they were unlikely to get back. So since then, we took the government to court, we won in court, and the remedy was, surprise, that the government should repay some of the money that had been overpaid. Instead, the government refused to do that, and the pensions issue has been back in the courts during February, when the case that PCS took, along with the FBU and a number of other public sector unions, went to the High Court. We don't have an outcome from that yet, but clearly what's likely is, even though our legal advice is very, very strong, and there's a good chance we may win that hearing, with a general election on the cards, it is likely that a remedy will be kicked into the long grass and possibly beyond a general election. But the importance of the pension issue is because it unifies so many of our members. It doesn't matter where you work. Nobody thinks it's fair that we should overpay on our pension money that we're unlikely to get back. So pensions and demands on pension remain very much a key part of the campaign. But the third issue is around jobs and job security. So you'll remember, thanks to the action that our members took last year, we got a commitment from the government to overturn what had been a manifesto commitment for them, that they would attack the civil service compensation scheme, that they would slash that by 33%. And thanks to the action that members took, they have now given a commitment that that would be untouched throughout the life of this parliament. And of course, any government can only give a commitment for the life of the parliament. So whilst the civil service compensation scheme doesn't remain part of the campaign, the issues around jobs and job security very much does, not least following the minister standing up in the House of Commons last year calling for 66,000 civil service job cuts. And although it's been hard for anybody, including the Cabinet Office, to try and quantify that figure and how that level of job cuts might be made, it becomes increasingly important that we try to get job security for our members, ideally a compulsory redundancy guarantee, but certainly some commitments about jobs, future jobs and job security. So those three key demands, pay, pensions and jobs, are cross-cutting. They impact on whichever part of the civil service or related bodies that you work in. And they are overarching national issues. There will be other issues in various government departments that by their nature are delegated, so they will be different depending on the department you work in. Those three big ticket issues remain the demands for the national campaign. So we surveyed our members. The results, not surprisingly, are pretty shocking. 32,500 members out of the 149,000 possible responses gave us a response rate of around 22%. 94% support for the PCS demands, which is obviously excellent. 80% support for strike action to achieve those demands, and 64% support for the levy in order to do that. But members have previously told us in cost of living surveys that 14,000 of our members, potentially about 8%, are regularly now using food banks. Potentially roughly 20% of our membership are having to skip meals. 53% of members responded that they're worried about being able to keep up with the rent or mortgage payments. 25,000 of our members have had to take an additional job, and just under 10% of our membership say they've claimed in-work benefits because they are in low-paid work. 38% of members are applying for jobs outside the civil service, and 16% of our members say they dread school holidays because they don't know how they're going to feed their children. So that is why the campaign is so important, and it's why it's so timely. There is no realistic prospect of kicking these issues into the long grass and hoping that they go away. It's very clear that we need to have a live campaign, and one that's able to pursue these issues for anybody that's able to beat the threshold in the delegated ballot, the disaggregated ballot that's been run, so that we can take action against what the government is proposing to do. So let's talk through that in a little bit of detail. As I say, the consultation was fairly compelling and gave us fairly compelling evidence. The slight exception to that is in Scottish Government, where there have been a Scottish sector rather, where there've been ongoing discussions with the Scottish sector members about whether or not they should form part of the national campaign ballot, because of the different agreements and arrangements that have been reached within the Scottish sector. So on both pay and jobs, they have live agreements in place. So the only issue that would unify them with the rest of us in the national campaign would be around the pensions issue. And therefore, on balance, although it's obviously a judgment, the executive or the leadership really for the Scottish sector members took the decision that they should not be included in the ballot. But for the rest of our members that were previously balloted, we will be pursuing that ballot now with the timetable that Martin outlined. The reason we do that, of course, is because we don't take action for action's sake. We don't just take it to make a bit of a protest. We take it because we hope it's going to get something better for our members, and we have a good track record of doing that. The government were due to publish their remit guidance at around the end of March. There is likely to be some slippage. All the indications are it's not likely to be published at the end of March. We're trying to pursue with our parliamentary group some questions about why the delay and why that is. But we need to be in a position to take action at a stage when we can influence that remit and the talks that flow from it. So once the remit guidance is published, employers are tasked with entering into talks with the relevant trade unions. The danger of not balloting now and delaying that or kicking that into the long grass or waiting until the summer months is that what happens is the employer starts to settle dispute or pay deals in many departments, whether or not that's by agreement or whether it's an imposition. Nevertheless, the idea that various groups become picked off, if you like, because they have already settled or imposed on a pay offer means that it's really important we take action at a stage when we can have influence. We have a number of initiatives taking place at the moment with our organising staff. So all branches will be allocated organising staff who will work with the reps and the members there to make sure we've got everything in place to ensure we engage every single member. So if you've got colleagues that perhaps aren't on this call tonight, or even who aren't PCS members, it's a really good time to have a conversation with them about the importance of the campaign and why PCS are doing what we're doing and why we're doing it now. So there will be lots of briefings available at a regional and local level. There's lots of materials that I know our team are working very hard to fulfill the orders for. So if you've placed an order for your material, it is on its way. And if you haven't, then you need to probably order your material quite quickly so that we can get a message to every single member why we want them to participate in the ballot and why it isn't enough anymore just to be cheesed off about these issues, but that in order for us to do something about them, to be able to take action, to be able to influence the government and the employer, the only way of doing that is to be part of the campaign, to vote in the ballot and to vote yes to support the demands that I've outlined there. So there'll be lots and lots of activity going on within PCS to try to make that happen. A week tonight, on the 26th of March, there will be a senior lay reps forum where we will be bringing together the leadership of all groups and regions and nations, of course, to discuss how we can engage with members. It's quite a long ballot period. It's 8 weeks, but we need to remember, of course, that Easter falls within those 8 weeks, and it's really important, therefore, that branches are sort of hitting the ground running, getting the messaging out to their members, making sure that members understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. The result, as Martin said, will come after the ballot closes on the 13th of May, and PCS's annual delegate conference will meet the following week, where whatever the outcome of the ballot, there will be a debate taking place at the conference for our reps and activists on behalf of members to endorse the decision to take forward the next steps of the campaign and to agree how we take the campaign forward. There's lots and lots of information available to branches and reps. If there's anything that you're not sure of, if there's anything that's not clear, if there's anything that perhaps you are getting asked by your members and you're not quite sure of the answer, none of us are in this by ourselves. We work together, so please get in touch, whether you get in touch with us nationally, whether you get in touch with your group or your regional secretary in the first instance. We can give you the answers to any of the questions that your members may be asking. The academic research, as I say, is quite powerful. It's quite powerful in putting forward the argument about why people need an element of what we call restoration. So, in other words, for all those years that civil service pay has been held down or restrained under successive governments, what needs to happen now to bring that to an acceptable level? It's not a race to the bottom. We want to make sure that everybody receives an increase above inflation with an element of restoration built into that. The second piece of research, which is not yet available but should be with us quite soon, is why it benefits any government and any employer to pay civil servants and public sector workers fairly. And clearly that will be important, not just in discussions with the current government and the current government ministers, but with any incoming government. As we know, there'll be a general election at some point this year, in terms of placing clear demands on them about what it is we expect and what it is that we demand on behalf of our members. So I know I've spoken for quite a while. Clearly, we've had a couple of examples just recently of members taking targeted action. So in particular, in the pensions regulator and in the National Museums in Liverpool. And a big shout out to the members in both of those groups, because they've had some fantastically vibrant picket lines. We've seen the pictures on social media. I know a number of us have visited those picket lines, and I'm quite pleased to report that in the case of the pensions regulator, there is a pause at the moment to allow talks to take place, and we're optimistic that we may be able to make some gains in terms of the issues there, and the employer being unwilling at this, or has been unwilling to pay the same amount of pay increases every other employer in the campaign, and we're hopeful that we will get some gains from the talks that are taking place. On the National Museum of Liverpool, I, along with some of the local reps involved in the campaign, met Sir David Henshaw yesterday, and whilst we don't think we're there yet, we are certainly moving forwards in terms of where we need to be to get a possible improvement for the members there. But also we're very clear, and were very clear with Sir David Henshaw yesterday, that our members are determined to keep going until they are given a cost of living payment in line with that everybody else received. So I hope that people found the update useful. There's bound to be things that I've skipped on this. So if there's anything you want to ask, if there's anything I haven't covered, or anything that I have that you want more information on, now is your chance. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thanks very much, Fran. And lots of questions are coming in, which we'll get to, start answering some of those in a second. And just before we move to the questions, though, just a couple of reminders. Please keep your questions coming, either on Facebook or on X or via YouTube, and those questions will be fed directly through to us. And also, please keep your messages of solidarity coming through as well. You'll have noticed that now we have them going flashing across the screen as they are coming into us. So please keep them coming, because clearly that is an important part of what we're doing here tonight as well. Just before we move to the questions, that there is one message of solidarity that I will read out that's coming that won't have flashed across your screen, and that has come from the PCS Parliamentary Group. So the PCS Parliamentary Group said it sends its full solidarity to all PCS members who are taking part in this national ballot over pay, pensions and jobs. We stand shoulder to shoulder with civil servants right across the UK. We acknowledge your dedication and commitment to the public and wish you every success in your ballot. We are on hand to assist and promote your campaign in Parliament, and we will welcome the opportunity to speak to PCS members in our constituencies. Solidarity, and I say that comes from the PCS Parliamentary Group, and I'm sure everyone on the event tonight, live on the event tonight, would really welcome that message of solidarity from those MPs who are constantly working on our behalf in Parliament. And just a reminder as well, that you will have received to your personal home email addresses in the last number of days a invite to register and sign up for PCS Strike Schools. They are a really good way of engaging members directly and making sure that our messaging that Fran's outlined tonight, but also some useful and more detailed tips about how we can build for the ballot and how we can absolutely make sure we maximize our potential in delivering the ballot. So if you haven't done as yet, please click on the link on an email that you'll have sent and register for one of those. There are a number across every region and nation within the union that are taking place over the next 7 to 10 days. So please make sure, if you haven't done as yet, to register them and make sure you take a full and active part in the campaign. Okay, then we're going to move on then to the sort of first set of questions. And if it's okay, Fran, I'll do them in threes, like normal. So first of all, a few around the actual pay element of it itself. And so why are we not asking for a percentage rise in the national pay claim? When will we find out about the outcome of the pensions court case? And are Labour sympathetic to our demands? They're the first three.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Martin, and thank you for the people that put in those questions. On the why no percentage figure in the pay claim, basically it's to give us flexibility around the negotiations that we hope to get involved in. One of the consequences of the research that's been published is that the amount that people have fallen behind by means different things for different grades, and clearly, as I think I said when I spoke, we don't want to race to the bottom. We want to ensure that everybody has their pay brought up to a decent standard, that standard is above inflation, but that there's also an element of restoration. There was a bit of a debate at the NEC about placing a figure on it. The beauty of putting a figure on is it's simple and it's easy to understand. But the reason we chose not to is because for some people, the element by which they've fallen behind is far, far greater than any demand that we would want to make. So, you know, if you remember what I said, for some grades, we're talking between 62 and 67% element of restoration. And yet for others, in different grades, it's nearer sort of 18 and 20%. And so rather than place a figure on it, which in some ways could limit the discussions that we believe need to take place, both with the Cabinet Office, but also with delegated employers, the decision was taken that this will give us a more opportunity for flexibility in our negotiations, not just with the current government, but actually with any incoming government, because it's quite clear, you know, none of us have a crystal ball, none of us who know who the next government is going to be, but let's assume that the next government is different to the current one. We want to be able to make very clear our demands about what a coherent pay system would look like in the civil service. On the outcome of the pensions issue, we don't have a timeline other than to say, as I said when I spoke, the case went back to the High Court in February. It was a 3-day hearing. We've had no outcome from that yet. And, you know, sometimes these things can be quite quick. Sometimes they take a lot longer. But what I also said, if you recall, is that there is a good chance that even if we're successful in that High Court hearing, the government may see it in their interest to kick any sort of remedy into the long grass, knowing that they face a general election in the months ahead. So I don't think we can rest on our laurels and assume that the pensions issue is going to be resolved anytime soon. But clearly, it's an issue that members feel incredibly strongly about, and it's one that we want to keep very much on any government's radar. In terms of a Labour sympathetic to our demands, I have written to Sir Keir Starmer this week to ask for a meeting. People may or may not know that in the 24 years that Mark was the General Secretary of PCS, Mark Sawatka, there was never a formal meeting between him and Keir Starmer. And we want to put that right, and we want them to listen very much to the demands that we have to make on pay. So we're making very clear to the sort of front bench Labour MPs that we want a dialogue with them. We want to set out very clearly what our demands are on pay. We want the opportunity to talk through what the cost of living crisis has meant for our members, but also what it is we would like to see from any incoming government. We have some really supportive MPs in the PCS parliamentary group, not just Labour MPs, I have to say, that they're across the political spectrum. Certainly from the SNP, the chair of the PCS parliamentary group is Chris Stevens, an SNP MP. We have MPs as well from the Senate and from the Welsh administration, and we work closely with the parliamentary group. In fact, I was in a meeting with them this morning to outline the detail behind some of the issues that we're talking about and the demands, so that they are then able to go and shape relevant questions that they can raise in the House of Commons, that they can raise in debate, that they can write to Conservative ministers or government ministers and try to get answers for us. So in terms of, you know, our MP work more generally, there's an awful lot going on to try and engage all of them. But in terms of Labour and whether they're sympathetic, now is a really good time to be making clear our demands on an incoming Labour government. but also, we've heard some of the rhetoric from Labour, if you like, where they've repeated some of the Tories' lines around public sector pay, which is why it's really important that we get into a dialogue with them, and we don't let them off the hook, and we do that sooner rather than later. I think that's it. That's the first three, Martin. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much, Fran. And it was remiss of me to say not to say that those questions came from Jan, Colin, and Neil in that
Thank
order.
you.
Okay, comrades, we're going to move on to the next three, so the set of three now. These are more organisational questions, Fran. So the first one is from Samuel, and that is, why are Scottish Government members not involved in the ballot? You did cover that in your contribution, yeah. But maybe just confirming and reiterating that point.
Yeah.
What are the chances of getting over the 50% threshold? And that's from Lisa. And from Patricia, how can I help get the vote out?
Right. Well, three great questions. On Sam's point, I don't know whether you caught me, Sam, when I was doing my presentation, or whether you'd already submitted your question, but we've had quite detailed discussions with the Scottish sector, not just Scottish Government, but the whole of the Scottish sector, because it is a bit of a nuanced position in terms of Scottish devolved sector. They have a 2-year settlement on pay and a commitment on job security. So in effect, were we to include them in the national ballot, we would be including on the issue of pensions alone. And there are risks with that, aren't there? Do people feel strongly enough to participate in the same numbers if it's only about that one issue? And it's a balance. And I think the NEC were, to some extent, quite relaxed about whether Scottish sector members felt they should be part of the campaign, and we wanted to get a view from them, and for them to let us know whether they wish to be part of that or not. And of course, instinctively, as trade unionists, many of them wanted to be part of the campaign and felt that it wouldn't be nice for them to see it all happening and them not be part of it. But they also made judgments about how their members would feel, recognising that the three areas that everybody else was being balloted on to didn't apply to them. And so, on balance, and it was a balance, the Scottish Devolved Sector Committee took the decision that they would not be included in the statutory ballot. However, they remain sympathetic, they remain supportive of the campaign, and would want to contribute and pay into the levy, recognising that if we do get somewhere with pensions justice and we do achieve our aims on pensions, then everybody benefits from that. So thank you for the question, and clearly, as I say, it's always a bit of a judgment, and that was why we were keen to hear from them themselves in terms of what they would want to do. On Lisa's question about are we confident that we'll get over the 50%? The reason we have, you probably know this, but there are 207 separate employers involved in the campaign. And the reason we have decided to ballot on a disaggregated basis is because every employer that beats the 50% can then be in a position to take action, every employer group where members vote by over 50%. But it's hard work, because we know, don't we, with the government legislation that exists right now, it can't be an electronic vote. It can't be pressing a quick button and saying, yes, I support this. People have to fill out a ballot paper, put a cross in a box, stick it in an envelope, take it to the post box and post it. And I've lost count of the number of members I've spoken to over the years when I've been doing phone banking or talking to members in what was my own branch, who've said, oh yeah, I had that ready to post. It was on the mantelpiece, it was behind the clock, it was on the dining room table, and it never got posted. And so we, between us, and I say we, I mean everybody on this call, everybody who's listening tonight, we're going to have to work together to ensure that as many employer groups as possible, we get over the 50% threshold. It's possible, it's doable, it's achievable. We've shown that before, and we know many reps and members work incredibly hard to try and ensure that we're able to beat the threshold. But I think we have to look at it this way. think about the issues that I've talked about: pay, pensions, jobs. Are they issues that matter to our members? Yes, they are. Do we think that we're worth better pay, job security, and redress on our pensions? I think we do. So if all of those things are a yes, there is only one way that we can do that, and that is by beating the threshold and being in a position to take action. Because as I said earlier, we can be as cheesed off as we like, and we can be as annoyed as we like about what the government aren't doing, but unless we're able to beat that ballot threshold in every one of those employer groups that are part of the campaign, then we are powerless to take industrial action. And that is what the government rely on. They rely on that level of apathy where people may not feel very happy about things, but don't feel quite motivated enough to take their ballot paper to the letterbox. So we've got to be better than that. And to do that, we need to engage every single member. So, Patricia, you're my dream member, Patricia, because that's the question that we want members to ask. What can I do to help? How can I get involved? And there's no clever answer to this. The best way of getting involved is just talking to your colleagues, talking to people. If they're not in the union yet, talking to them about the importance of joining, recognizing that no government is going to meet these demands out of benevolence. They're going to do it if they feel some pressure to do so, if they feel that there's a need for them to do something or to act. So if you think about all the things we gained as a result of our previous action, we gained them at a point when we could put pressure on the employer that the employer couldn't ignore. So this year is no different. We need to work together. We need to do everything in our power to ask every member to vote and participate. Have you had a ballot paper? And then once we know they've had a ballot paper, have you filled it in? Have you posted it off? And if we can do that with every single member and every single person that you're in contact with, that is our best chance of being in a position to take successful action that will bring the employer to the table in order to meet our demands. So in answer to your question, Patricia, anything you can do to work with your branch, to work with the people, your colleagues, the people you work with, to encourage them to participate is the most effective thing that you can possibly do. If you want to become a rep or an advocate, that would be fantastic, and we can contact people. Anybody who wants to get in touch with us, we can put you in touch with people about being more involved in PCS and playing a role. But just the very simple act of engaging with colleagues and encouraging them to participate is the best thing that any of us can do to make sure we're confident we can win the ballot. To address Lisa and Patricia's question, how can we be confident? We can be confident because we know our members feel strongly about the issues and they're willing to do something about them. What can I do to help? Well, you can talk to every single person you work with and encourage them to participate. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Fran. And the next three questions are all to do with the levy. Three quite different questions, but all about the levy. So the first one from Nadia is, why should I pay the levy when I'm not in the ballot?
Okay.
Second question from Alan is, with an annual income of £24 million in the union, why not take the money for the strike pay from existing subscriptions rather than adding to it? And then finally from Kerry is, how much will the levy be and what support is there for members who will struggle to pay more?
Okay, thank you. Obviously, I don't know the details of Nadia's question in terms of what not being in the ballot, but let's assume that you are in an employer group that is not impacted by all of the three issues, but the decision has been taken that you'd still pay into the levy. My guess is you will still benefit from on at least one of those issues should we achieve success. So the idea behind the levy, and you've probably heard people explain this before, but it is worth just spending a couple of minutes on. It's the idea that all of us make quite a modest contribution. So let's recap. It's £3 for those earning less than £18,000 a year and £5 for those earning more. So in doing that, that means that people pay a modest sum every month to support action that others take on their behalf. So when you're not losing pay because you're not striking yourself, the people that are on strike are supported by that levy. It's quite a simple principle, and what it led to, because when we think back to the question, why do we take industrial action? We take industrial action because we want to make gains with the employer. We want to win our demands. And if the employer believes that they can just sit something out, or it'll be a day's protest action, or it'll be a bit of action that they can largely ignore, and then when people come back to work, they just have the work to catch up on, they are likely to try and sit that out. What was different about the strategy last year is the backup of the levy meant that we could indicate to employers not just that we were going to take action, but that we were going to be able to sustain that action until they met our demands. And that is when we started to make gains. We're not a particularly wealthy union. The question about the money in the reserves, there is of course money in the reserves, but that money goes on an awful lot of other things. Whilst if we are successful with more legal cases that lead to large lump sums like we had in the GWP when we took them to court over Chekhov, we are able to subsidise the levy. But what we're not able to do, in the way that perhaps some of the biggest unions, the most wealthy unions, are able to do, is just chuck tens of millions of pounds into a levy. That levy is brought about by members standing together, making a fairly modest contribution in order to ensure that we can send a message to the government and the employer that the action won't just hit them, it will be sustained until they are able to meet our demands. And in terms of how much, the levy is likely to be on the same basis that it was last year. So the £3 and £5, depending how much you earn. But I mean, that will be an ongoing discussion. The NEC met when it met in March, had a discussion about the levy and have agreed that in support of this campaign, the levy would be reinstated if we win the 50% threshold, we beat the 50% threshold for areas that we do. The levy would be reinstated at the end of May, so it would kick in from the beginning of June in terms of the contributions. Of course, for people who are really, really struggling, many branches have a hardship fund. The union itself has hardship funds that can be tapped into. So people are able to make claims on hardship in the way that they always have been able to do. But as I say, the idea behind the levy is that we sustain that action by a fund that enables us to send a clear message to the employer that we intend to keep the action going, and that is when we start to see movement and gains from them. And can I just correct my figures? I said 18,000 there, it's 24,000. So £3 a month for those earning less than 24,000, and £5 for those earning above that. Just as a point of clarity, we paid £6.1 million in strike pay last year. So the campaign that people were involved in, because of the levy and the money that was generated, we were able to pay strike pay to the tune of £6.1 million, something we wouldn't have been able to do without it. And £2 million of that was funded via the general fund, £5 million via the levy. So it's always, when people are low paid, none of this is done lightly, and it's not something that any of us take for granted. It's a big ask for people to be involved in the campaign, but it's really, really important that we're able to send a message that will take action that we can sustain, and the levy is the way of doing that.
Okay, that's great, Fran. Thanks very much. And just to let you know that a number of questions have come through which are very group specific and quite group specific. Okay. But what I suggest we do with those is we refer them to the groups themselves, because the level of detail we want to provide as full a response as we possibly can to those very say group specific issues. So we'll pass them on to the relevant groups by the group secretaries and make sure that they are included either in a Q&A or certainly replied to through those channels. But there are three other questions now about the national campaign, and they're a mix, Fran. Some of them are organising, and one more of a statement really than a question. But the first question is from Joanne, and is: even if we win the ballot, won't the new anti-strike laws make it almost impossible to take action? The statement, more of a statement from Mark from HMRC, is that the AAs and AOs in HMRC are still waiting to hear whether they will or won't receive the national minimum wage uplift. It's only 12 days until the 1st of April, and the department haven't decided yes or no. This is a shocking way to treat the lowest paid staff. And then the final one is, it's this more of an organising question, that's from Gabriella. Despite the MOJ being amongst the lowest paid government department, we do struggle to meet the threshold for strike action across that department or across that group. Will PCS do extra outreach work in areas which could be candidate for effective targeted action so they can get over the threshold for industrial action?
Okay, thank you for those 3 questions. On Joanne's question, obviously you will be painfully aware, as I am, that the government are introducing legislation via the Minimum Service Levels Bill to try and make strike action more difficult. In the first instance, the area that they appear to be targeting is our border force members, and to that end, we have launched judicial review proceedings around our members' ability to take action there. We have quite good legal advice that actually, were the employer to impose the Minimum Service Bill legislation, that we would have a strong legal case. Obviously, it is for employers to make a decision about whether they impose that legislation, and clearly you will have seen most recently with ASLEF, the train drivers union, that in their dispute the employer chose not to implement the legislation, and obviously that was a big victory for ASLEF at the time. But if there's one employer that's likely to put that to the test, it's the government, and the government is clearly our employer. And so we are anticipating that there may well be a challenge, not so much to everybody who would be part of a campaign, but in particular targeted groups of members. Obviously, we're doing a lot of work with the parliamentary group and with lawyers to look at what we can do to counter all of that. But we recognise that, you know, this government's operating a bit of a scorched earth policy at the moment, where they're attacking as much as they can, as fast as they can, whilst they've still got power. And, you know, there is no doubt that there is a risk from the minimum service level bill. One of the things about my new job, so becoming General Secretary, is that it gets me a seat on the TUC General Council, and the TUC had a recall conference in December to discuss what the collective response of the trade union movement would be the first time that the minimum service level legislation was introduced, and there was general agreement, if not unanimity, that unanimity, I can't even say it, that there would be a collective response from the whole movement. And obviously, you know, we need to put that to the test a little bit if it's the case that our members in Border Force in particular are faced with legislation around the minimum service levels bill. So it's a really good question, Joanne. You know, I don't have a crystal ball, and I can't tell you how that is going to end, but certainly with the legal advice that we have, we are actively now pursuing the judicial review, and it will be for the employer to then decide whether they want to put that to the test. Mark's point around the HMRC and the AAs and AOs, and whether the HMRC haven't even declared whether they intend to honour the uplift. I think they will find whether they intend to or not. By the law, they're legally bound to do so. So a suggestion from the HMRC that they're not going to pay the national minimum wage would be one that I think would be met with an incredibly strong response, and one that, you know, we would want to hear about very, very quickly if there's any suggestion of that. So, you know, we're obviously, as a union, we all stand together in terms of these big issues. And the whole problem with the national minimum wage uplift every year is it completely skews the amount of money that's available in terms of delegation, because so many of our members fall below that minimum level. And so the idea that a department the size of the HMRC hasn't decided whether or not they'll pay it, I think they will have a bit of a shock coming to them if they make a decision that they won't be honouring that this year. And it's one that will very quickly land them in some bother, I would suggest. Can you just, on Gabriella's point, Martin, it was around the MOD and around whether we would put in targeted resource to help them to beat the threshold.
Yeah.
And Gabriella, I'm really very much aware of the issues that you raised, because often, despite, as you say, low pay levels and a large level of anger amongst the members there, it's difficult to beat the threshold. And what we have committed is that we will work with all branches to give them every chance, every effort, if you like, to try to beat the 50% threshold. And that includes every branch in the MOD. If you get in touch in the first instance with your group and your GEC and your group secretary, but I mean, if there's nobody for you to contact, you're not quite sure who to contact, you can always get in touch with us directly at a national level to raise those issues. We will do everything we can to support any group of workers who are working, pulling together to try to beat that threshold, because I know how frustrating it can be, and people feel a clear level of anger about the issues that we're campaigning over, but it's all very frustrating if you can't beat the threshold. So we'll work with you in terms of all of that, and I do appreciate that can be difficult, but yeah, just keep in touch with us and we'll do everything we can to support you.
Okay, brilliant, Fran, thanks. Okay, there are 3 other questions now. So a lot of these questions that are coming through are quite specific to the groups. So as I said, I think the best way to get a fuller response to all of those is to pass them through the groups. But there are 3 that I'll ask you to come back on. And the first one is from Ian. Excuse me. I work from home. How can I best support the campaign and ballot? And from Kerry, when we get the ballot results, who and how will we decide who takes the strike action for the maximum impact?
Yeah.
And then the final one, which I think is perhaps more of a statement, but I think it is worth a response into it, Fran, is that it took months of action for small rise last year. I don't want a long campaign losing pay while striking and paying a strike levy again for no result, but these demands are not realistic. So I think that's probably a response that we do need to give.
Okay, well, again, thanks for those. On Ian's point about working from home, I think one thing that the world of work post-pandemic has taught us is that nothing stayed the same as it. And now we have a large group of workers that aren't always in the workplace, but very much want to be part of the campaign. And I think, it is difficult because clearly, there are restrictions placed in terms of the way people can communicate when it's to discuss industrial action. But we clearly want to work with every single one of you to get the message out there. And I would say, Ian, that the best way of supporting the campaign is obviously make sure you return your own ballot paper. I think that goes without saying. But anybody you're talking to, anybody you're engaging with, or anybody you have contact through your work with, make sure they're doing the same. And I think that that's all we can ask, is that everybody is talking to their colleagues about why the campaign is so important. On Kerry's question around the ballot results. So the ballot results come in on the closing date. So let's say it closes at 12 noon on the 13th of May. As you can imagine, we will have 207 separate sets of results to sort of pull together. So they don't come out instantly at 1 minute past 12. All the checks are done to make sure that they're accurate and correct, and that they're done by an independent scrutineer. So we're at their behest a little bit to make sure that the results are correct and everything's okay. And then the NEC will meet on the 15th of May to discuss what motion to put to the conference, reflecting the ballot result, but also proposing steps forward about what steps to take. And whatever is decided at that NEC on the 15th will be debated by every conference delegate that attends annual delegate conference in May the following week. So if you are in a branch that sends delegates to conference, those delegates are there on your behalf to vote and take part in the debate around the next steps of the national campaign. Ultimately, the NEC makes the decisions about where we can target action. We have a National Disputes Committee that meets at very short notice, usually within an hour of a submission being received, to take decisions in between National Executive Committee meetings. any area that's beaten the threshold, or is an employer group that's beaten the threshold, that feels that they have a legitimate case for targeted action, for action where we might be able to target a campaign that would have an impact on the employer, is free to put in submissions. The submissions are, very, very high rate of being supported, clearly, as long as they have sufficient membership support, there's sufficient levels of PCS membership in the area that's being targeted. Obviously, if nobody's in the union, it's a bit hard to mount an effective campaign. So clearly showing membership support and levels of membership that would make the campaign a success, a key to a successful submission to the National Disputes Committee. But that those submissions can be sent in by groups on behalf of targeted areas of work at any time. And on the last point, I don't think you gave a name, Martin, on the last point. As you said, probably a bit more of an observation than a question. I mean, nobody wants a long campaign, and nobody does this lightly. Our members in the main are low paid, and it is a sacrifice and a commitment to be part of a campaign of industrial action. But we also know that the government, if they feel that it's going to be a quick campaign which they can sit out, that's exactly what they will do. And in particular, in a year where we face a general election, if they could find a way of sweeping this into the long grass, and that is exactly what they would do. So whilst I do appreciate your points about you don't want to pay into a campaign that doesn't deliver anything, I would argue that the campaign we've all been involved in has delivered an awful lot. And without the campaign, we would be significantly worse off. We wouldn't, whilst what we achieved is never enough, and there's always further gains to be made. I would suggest that without the campaign that was taken part in by so many of our members, we would not be sitting here having a discussion, having banked a commitment on the civil service compensation scheme, which, let's remember, was a manifesto commitment from the Tory party to slash it by 33%. As a result of the action you took, that didn't happen. And in fact, it has saved our members tens of thousands of pounds, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds in the period since we were able to achieve that commitment. On pay, we more than doubled the original remit. If you remember, the government claimed that the remit would be 2%. We ended up with, in every employer group, bar the pensions regulator, where we're hopeful of a successful outcome, we've had 4.5% with an additional 0.5% targeted at the lowest paid. Again, that would never have happened without the campaign. So I do appreciate your points about not wanting a long campaign. And of course, if it could be done quickly, then obviously that would be preferable for all of us. But unfortunately, in the world that we live in the real world that we inhabit, with the government that we have, often it takes a campaign to run and be sustained in order for the government to make changes to what they're proposing to do. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, great, Fran. Thanks very much. I think there probably are three quick final questions that we can probably cover off before we wrap up. And the first one isn't strictly speaking to do with the national campaign, but I think it is a common theme that is running through the union at the minute. And that this is from, I haven't got a name, but it's NM. And it is, what is PCS doing to fight the office attendance tool and the 60% requirements at HMRC? And I know that's not just a HMRC issue, that's an issue right across a number of government departments right now. If we do get over the 50%, what form could the action take? Yeah. And are we likely to strike for days or weeks? And that's from Christina. And then I think the final one, but it's a good one to finish with, Fran. How great would it be to see out this soon-to-be outgoing government with a bang, with the union full of passionate employees who say enough is enough of treating us with contempt? And that's from Nicola.
I love Nicola's question. I'm going to come to that last. So NM, on office attendance, it's one of those issues that is different in every government department. So when we talk about delegated bargaining as opposed to collective coherence bargaining, if you like. One of the problems with the office attendance statement that was made and the demands that have been made for 60% attendance is that they impact differently depending which employer you work for, and so therefore there isn't a unifying way of dealing with the office attendance issue other than through your departmental group. And I think Martin said you were from HMRC, but as Martin said, there are people in many employer groups that feel very, very strongly about this. And we feel strongly about it too, because what people were able to prove successfully during the pandemic and beyond is that there's so much work that can be done successfully from home. There are always people that need to be in the office all the time, and we have groups of members that in fact worked in the office all the way through the pandemic and since. But there are other groups of members who have successfully proven that in fact that isn't a necessity for them, and their work can be delivered just as efficiently, if not more so, from home. So the government sort of demand that everybody comes in 60% of the time seems to be based on sand. When delegated employer trade union sides have got into negotiations about how that might work in practice, there have been varying responses, not least because in a number of government departments, the employer has decided to do away with the estate. And so even if everybody came to work on the same day or for 60% of the time, you might struggle to then get everybody into the building. And it's quite clear that when you look beneath the surface of what was quite a high level announcement based on Jacob Rees-Mogg's little post-it notes with "sorry, we missed you" and all these civil servants swan around working from home, underneath that high level statement, there is no basis for the demand that they're making. So the response on that is clearly partly with delegated employers, so the trade union side in your relevant group, so in your case the HMRC GEC, who meet with the HMRC as an employer to discuss how or if that could ever work in your employer group. But above that, with the Cabinet Office, that myself and Martin and a negotiating team will meet to discuss how a high level statement like that can actually even be workable in practice. So we are doing everything we can to challenge that. If there's any group of workers that feel that they, any group really that feels they want to challenge that and mount an industrial response to that, then that's something they need to consult over and talk to members about, and we would look sympathetically at any submissions that were received around all of that. But at the moment we are trying to pin the Cabinet Office down, and not just the Cabinet Office, obviously delegated employers as well, about how that could actually work in practice. And the truth is, I don't think anybody's even attempting to justify it. So it's one thing to have newspaper articles that talk about civil servants refusing to set foot in an office and we want them in there 60% of the time, but the reality of how that could work in practice is quite different, and we are trying to make sure that we pin them down on some commitments. But some of it, as I say, will be dealt with by your GEC at that delegated level, and the high level stuff will be tackled by us at the Cabinet Office. And on Christina's point, wouldn't it be great if we could beat the 50% threshold? What form could our action take? If we beat the 50% threshold, that's a discussion for all of us, isn't it? It's a discussion about wouldn't it be great, and what can we do with it, and how can we best use the mandate to make sure that we put demands on the employer that lead to gains for our members. And that will be a fantastic position for us to be in, assuming that we're successful in beating the threshold. So it's in our hands, really. We've got just under 8 weeks now to deliver, and that means getting every single person to fill their ballot paper in, put it in an envelope, take it to the post box, and then tell their union branch that they've done so that people don't keep pestering them. And if we can do all of that when we wake up on the 14th of May, having done all we can to get every single person voting, we will be in a position to be really considering what we can do with that mandate, what form the action takes, and how imaginative groups might be about the sort of action that they want to take. We saw some fantastic examples during the last period of targeted action, and I know there are many groups that have got together and identified areas that they believe could be primed for targeted action. So our job is to work together to make that a possibility and then a reality. So thank you so much, or everybody who asked questions. Thank you, Christina, for that. In fact, was that Nicola? It was Nicola, wasn't it?
Christina, who asked that question.
Thank you, Christina and Nicola. I've got too many names scribbled down here. But yeah, I hope that that's covered all the questions.
Yeah, brilliant. Cheers, Fran. Thanks very much. Okay, comrades, I think we have probably come to the conclusion of the PCS Live event tonight. I hope you have all found that not only useful, but actually a really good basis for the work that we've all got to do over the next 8 weeks to deliver the biggest mandate we possibly can in every single employer group of the union. And just really a plea. When we've now go back to our workplaces from tomorrow morning, then every single one of us, whether we're an activist, whether we're a representative, whether we're an advocate, or whether we're a committed, good union member, absolutely has a vital role to play between now and the 13th of May. Every single one of us have to act as the leaders within our own workplaces, not only on our own desk or on our own workstation, but in convincing all of those other members within our respective groups to absolutely prioritise voting yes in this statutory ballot and giving us the biggest mandate that we possibly can for all the reasons that Fran has outlined tonight in her contribution. We cannot afford to leave a single stone unturned in this ballot. The opportunity we have to put pressure on the government, the Treasury, but also send a clear message to any new government that we end up with later in the year that we are determined, we haven't gone anywhere, we haven't gone away, we still demand and we know we have earned decent pay and a proper pay rise, not just this year, but moving forward. We know that we've been overpaying our pensions contributions now for over 5 years, and we are due that money, not just to be deducted or reduced in the amounts that we're paying now, but for that overpayment that we paid to be refunded. And we absolutely, every single one of us has earned a proper, decent job security agreement. And that's what's at stake with this ballot. So please do all you can between now and the 13th of May. Engage with those in your workplaces who you know are not members currently of PCS. Convince them to join. It goes without saying that the bigger we are, the better organised we are, the more likely it is that we can mount the sort of industrial response that will get the government to sit up and take notice, and it increases our ability to win on those demands. Any non-union members have until the 21st of April to join PCS and be able to take part in the statutory ballot. So yes, absolutely number one priority is to concentrate and focus on convincing those PCS members to return their ballot paper. But please as well, let's not forget those who aren't yet within PCS, convince them to join and join our national campaign. You have all absolutely earned the right to have a decent, proper standard of living and job security moving forward. And we aim to win that for you, but we can only do it by collectivising our efforts, like we did in the first phase of this campaign, achieve a brilliant national mandate, and that can put real hard-hitting pressure on the government and our respective employers. So please register for the strike schools if you haven't done as yet. Please make sure that you keep an eye out for your postal ballot paper that will be coming through any day now. Make sure you return it, and let's make sure we win the pay rise, the pensions justice, and job security you've all deserve. Good night.
Thanks.